retired veteran humiliated the army in front of everyone. The crowd gathered beneath the wide white tent as flags snapped sharply in the afternoon wind, their crisp rhythm echoing across the parade ground. Rows of polished boots shimmered in perfect alignment, medals gleamed like small suns, and the brass band warmed the air with patriotic hymns. It was supposed to be a celebration, a ceremony honoring distinguished service and showcasing the strength of the nation's armed forces. But no one expected that the most unforgettable moment of the day would come not from a decorated general or a marching regiment, but from a retired veteran who walked with a cane and wore a jacket far older than most of the soldiers standing at attention. Thomas Hale had once been a legend in uniform. Decades earlier, he had led a platoon through hostile terrain when communication lines failed and reinforcements never came. His quick thinking had saved lives, though he rarely spoke about it. After retirement, he faded quietly into civilian life, working at a hardware store and volunteering at the local school. His medals stayed tucked away in a drawer. He believed service was an action, not a performance. When the Army invited him to attend the ceremony as an honored guest, he hesitated. Something about the invitation felt rehearsed, almost decorative. Still, he went, wearing his old service jacket, the one that bore the creases of real use rather than ceremonial shine. As speeches began, the commanding officer spoke at length about honor, sacrifice, and unbreakable brotherhood. The crowd applauded politely, though many shifted in their seats under the heat. Thomas listened quietly from the front row. He noticed the oversized banners boasting recruitment numbers and glossy slogans about glory. He saw the rows of young recruits standing stiffly, their faces betraying nervousness rather than pride. He also noticed something else, a young private being subtly ridiculed by a superior for a minor uniform mistake. The officer's whispers were sharp, cutting. Thomas had seen that look before, the look of humiliation disguised as discipline. When the commanding officer invited any honored veteran to share a few words, it was meant as a symbolic gesture. No one expected anyone to step forward, but Thomas did. Slowly, deliberately, he rose from his chair. The cane tapped against the wooden stage as he climbed the steps. The band quieted. The commanding officer offered a tight smile and handed him the microphone. Thomas stood silently for a moment, surveying the crowd. "You all look impressive," he began, his voice steady but unpolished. "The uniforms are crisp, the medals are bright, the speeches are, well, rehearsed." A ripple of uneasy laughter spread across the audience. "But I didn't serve for applause. None of us did." He turned slightly, looking toward the formation of young soldiers. "When I was their age, I didn't know if I'd make it home. I didn't know if the man beside me would. We weren't thinking about recruitment posters or public ceremonies. We were thinking about survival and about each other." His voice grew firmer. "We survived because we respected each other, not because we feared being embarrassed for a crooked patch." The silence deepened. The commanding officer's smile faded. Thomas continued, "Discipline is necessary, standards matter, but respect matters more. I just watched one of your soldiers be humiliated for something small. Maybe you thought no one noticed. I did." He paused, letting the words settle heavily in the still air. If this army wants to be strong, it needs leaders who lift their soldiers up, not tear them down in whispers. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Some civilians shifted uncomfortably. A few soldiers' expressions flickered with something that looked like hope. "You speak of honor," Thomas said, turning back to the audience. "Honor isn't about how sharp your salute looks on camera. It's about how you treat the person standing next to you when no one's watching. It's about accountability. And yes, sometimes it's about admitting when the institution gets it wrong." The commanding officer stepped forward slightly, but Thomas raised a gentle hand. "I'm not here to disrespect the Army. I love the Army. It shaped me. It saved me. But loving something doesn't mean staying silent when it stumbles." His gaze softened. "Real strength is humility. Real courage is listening." For a moment, no one moved. The weight of his words hung heavier than the medals pinned across decorated chests. The young private who had been reprimanded stared straight ahead, though his eyes glistened. Several older veterans in the audience nodded slowly. Thomas lowered the microphone slightly. If you want to honor veterans, don't just invite us to sit in the front row. Ask us what we learned, and then listen. He handed the microphone back and made his way down the steps, cane tapping rhythmically. There was no dramatic music, no immediate applause, only a stunned quiet. Then, from somewhere near the back, a single clap rang out. Another followed. Within seconds, the sound grew into a wave, steady, powerful, undeniable. Soldiers began clapping first, their discipline momentarily replaced by genuine emotion. Civilians rose to their feet. Even a few officers joined in, albeit reluctantly. The commanding officer's face remained rigid, but the ceremony had shifted. The scripted narrative of flawless pride had cracked, revealing something far more authentic beneath it. Later that afternoon, away from the crowd, the commanding officer approached Thomas. There was tension in his posture, but also something else, reflection. "You put me in a difficult position up there," he said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Leadership often is." The officer hesitated. "You think we've lost our way?" Thomas considered the question. "I think you're at risk of mistaking image for integrity." He looked out at the parade ground, now empty. The Army doesn't need to be humiliated in front of everyone. It just needs to remember who it's supposed to serve, its people. The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he extended his hand. After a moment, Thomas took it. News of the speech spread quickly. Some headlines called it bold, others called it inappropriate. But among the ranks, conversations began about mentorship, about respect, about quiet corrections instead of public shame. The young private who had been scolded found himself approached by a senior sergeant later that week, not for punishment, but for guidance. Thomas returned to his quiet life. He didn't seek interviews or recognition. When asked about the incident, he simply said, "I told the truth." To him, it wasn't about humiliation. It was about accountability wrapped in love for an institution that had given him both purpose and scars. In the end, the Army had not been weakened by his words. It had been reminded of its foundation. And sometimes, the most patriotic act a veteran can commit is not blind loyalty, but courageous honesty spoken in front of everyone.